The first time they tried to erase me, they used a silver spoon. It wasn't a weapon in the physical sense, but in the way Serena, my sister-in-law, tapped it against her crystal water glass. The chime cutting through the low hum of family dinner conversation. Everyone stopped, their forks hovering over plates of roast chicken, and turned to her as if they'd rehearsed it. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I knew that sound. It was the prelude to a performance. Sundays used to be different when my husband, Liam, was alive. They were chaotic and warm, filled with the scent of his mother's baking and the sound of my son Leo's laughter as he chased his cousins across the lawn. Liam was the bridge, the one who effortlessly connected my quiet world to the boisterous, intricate universe of his family. After the car crash took him, that bridge collapsed, leaving me stranded on one side, watching them retreat to the other. At first, there was a flood of sympathy. Casseroles appeared on my doorstep, and Catherine, my mother-in-law, would call daily, her voice thick with shared grief. But grief has a half-life, and as months bled into years, their sympathy decayed into something else: inconvenience. The texts became shorter. I live in reminder of their loss. I understood, or at least I told myself that. I made myself smart, creative, asking for nothing, expecting less. He had his father's eyes and his unwavering belief in the goodness of kindness. Why doesn't Grandma Mom had asked. His small face was so complaining. We're still sad because I couldn't bear to tell him the truth that without his father, we were no longer a necessity. We were a loose thread. They were slowly, deliberately snipping away. So when Serena's text arrived family dinner Sunday, it would be wonderful to see you and Leo. We've missed you both. A cautious hope flickered within me. I ignored the voice that whispered it was a trap. I saw the pure, unadulterated joy on Leo's face. And that was enough. We arrived 5 minutes early. The house was immaculate. Clinically so. Every cushion fluffed. Every surface gleaming. Serena greeted us at the door. Her smile perfectly painted. Her hug, brief, and smelling of rosemary and control. Helada, you look... well, she said, the slight hesitation in her voice, turning the compliment into an assessment. The evening unfolded as a series of quiet dismissals. My offer to help in the kitchen was met with a polite, "Oh, everything's handled." My attempts at conversation were met with curt answers before the subject was changed to something I couldn't contribute to. Liam's father, Richard, remained barricaded behind his newspaper, offering only a grunt of acknowledgement. I was an outsider, a guest whose invitation they seemed to have forgotten they'd extended. The only warmth came from Uncle Arthur, Liam's great-uncle. He sat beside me, his hand gently patting mine. "It's good you're here, my dear," he murmured, his eyes kind. "The boy needs this. And so do you. Even if the rest of these fools are too blind to see it." His words were a small lifeboat in a cold ocean, and I clung to them. I watched Leo at the kids' table, laughing with his cousin, blissfully unaware of the currents of resentment in the room. And I told myself I could endure this. For him, I could endure anything. Then came the chime of the silver spoon. We were lingering over dessert, the children having run off to the basement. I thought we had made it. I thought the evening was over. Serena stood, a practiced look of concern on her face. "I feel we need to address something," she began, her voice carrying a false weight of sorrow. "There's been a tension in this family for a while now. And I think we all know what's going on. Our eyes didn't do anything. I hope it peaked. Everybody in the room was feeling guilty. But every mind was focused on me. I'm not saying Laura hasn't been feeling it either. It's normal. I know the answer. for everyone," she said, her smile returning, sharp and triumphant. "I thought we could have a simple, informal vote. No hard feelings. Just a show of hands. Should we? For the sake of peace. Ask Alara to refrain from attending family events from now on." For a heart-stopping second, there was only the sound of my own pulse hammering in my ears. Then, a hand went up. Catherine's. Then Richard's. Then a cousin. Then her husband. One by one, the hands rose around the table. A silent, unified condemnation. Every hand but one. Uncle Arthur sat with his arms crossed, his face a mask of disgust. I couldn't breathe. My world had tilted on its axis. And in that moment of deafening silence, a small voice broke through. Mom Leo stood in the doorway, a half-eaten cookie in his hand, his eyes wide as he took in the forest of raised hands pointed at his mother. Why are they doing that? The question shattered the last of my composure. I looked at my son, at the family who had just publicly disowned me in front of him, and I knew I couldn't let this be his memory of us. I stood up, my legs trembling, and took his hand. "Thank you for the meal," I said, my voice miraculously steady. "It's time for us to go." No one moved. No one spoke. As we walked past the table, Uncle Arthur reached out and squeezed my shoulder. "You're better than all of them," he whispered. I held Leo's hand, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. The silence in the car on the way home was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Leo sat beside me, his head resting against the cool glass of the passenger window, not saying a word. He didn't ask any more questions. Children have a sixth sense for pain they cannot name. And he had wrapped himself in a protective quiet. I focused on the road, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, each red traffic light feeling like a personal judgment. The only sound was the soft hum of the engine and the frantic beat of my own heart. When we got home, I went through the motions of our nightly routine with a detached precision. I helped him brush his teeth, tucked him into bed, and read him a chapter from his book. He fell asleep, his small fingers still gripping me as if he was afraid of my punishment. And then, in the absolute stillness of his mind, did I allow myself to crumble? I retreated to the living room and sat down. For hours, I just sat there in the dark. The scene would fit in my mind like a warped memory. The door of the room rising without hesitation. Richard's slow, deliberate nod as he followed suit. The faces of cousins I had shared holidays with, turning away from me as they joined the verdict. And Serena's face, illuminated by a victor's smile. They hadn't just uninvited me. They had tried to unmake me, to declare my existence in their family null and void. And they had done it in front of my son. The humiliation was a physical ache, a searing brand on my soul. A wave of hot, helpless anger washed over me. So potent, it made me dizzy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm back there and hurl their hypocrisy and cruelty back in their faces. But as the anger subsided, something colder and clearer took its place. This wasn't a sudden burst of malice. It was a strategy. They had been building to this for years. One unanswered text. One forgotten invitation at a time. My silence. My willingness to absorb the slights for the sake of a fragile peace had been mistaken for weakness. They believed I would simply absorb this too, that I would retreat, wounded and ashamed, and disappear from their lives as they wished. They had counted on it. That's when I thought of Leo. His question, why are they doing that? He wasn't just asking about the vote. He was asking why the people who were supposed to love him could hurt his mother. And I realized my key at dignity, my noble retreat, meant nothing if it taught my son that the answer was to let people hurt you without consequence. My promise to Liam, whispered over his hospital bed, wasn't just to keep Leo safe physically, but to protect his heart, his sense of belonging, and that family, in one calculated act, had declared war on it. A new resolve hardened within me. Sharp and unfamiliar, I slipped out of my stupor. My movements no longer sluggish with grief, but driven by purpose. I went to my purse and pulled out my phone. Before dinner, a knot of inexplicable dread had coiled in my stomach. Call it a premonition. While pretending to check for messages, I had quietly opened the voice memo app and pressed record, placing the phone face down on the table beside my plate. I hadn't known what I expected to capture, but I knew I needed a witness. Even if it was just an electronic one. My finger trembled as I pressed play. Something else. A few weeks prior, I had stopped by their house to drop off a birthday gift for my nephew. I needed to print a permission slip for Leo's field trip, and Serena had waved me toward their home office. The printer had been out of paper, and as I refilled the tray, I noticed a single sheet left behind from a previous job. It was the tail end of a group chat printout. Annoyed at her carelessness, but not thinking much of it, I had folded it and tucked it into my bag along with Leo's form, meaning to throw it away later. I scrambled to the study, my heart pounding, and dumped the contents of my bag onto the desk. There it was. My eyes scanned the text. Catherine, I just don't know how to handle her anymore. She makes everything so awkward. Serena, we need a permanent solution for the Alara problem. Constantly having to include her is draining. Richard let Serena handle it. She has a plan. Serena, don't worry. Everyone, I have an idea for Sunday dinner that will settle this for good. Just follow my lead. I stared at the paper, then at the phone in my hand, the audio file and the printout. This wasn't just a family argument. This was a conspiracy. They had plotted it, rehearsed it. They had built a cage of exclusion and expected me to walk into it willingly. But what they didn't know was that the woman who had walked out of that house tonight was not the same one who had walked in. The grieving widow was gone. A mother protecting her child had taken her place. I wasn't going to scream or cry. I was going to be strategic, precise, and unforgiving. The next move was mine, and I would not miss. The next morning, I woke before the sun, a cold clarity, settling where the chaotic grief had been. I made coffee. I didn't drink and opened my laptop. I didn't search for family lawyers. That was too broad. Too messy. I searched for reputation defense, harassment, and strategic litigation. I wasn't looking for someone to mediate a family squabble. I was looking for a weapon. By noon, I was sitting in the quiet, minimalist office of a woman named Evelyn Albright. She was in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of unshakable calm. I laid out the story. My voice devoid of I recounted the years of slow enslavement, the dinner, the hurt. She listened without interruption. I spoke aloud and shit. When I finished, she nodded slowly. This is a particularly cruel family for me. He said, "Your tone professional, but legally, it's awful. The best first step is a family lawyer's communication. I quickly but I stand directed. Mediation suggests there's a misunderstanding to be resolved." I said, my voice firm. There isn't. This was intentional. They believe I'm too weak to fight back. I felt a twinge of guilt, a pang of sorrow for the family that once was. But I pushed it aside. This was no longer about them. I slid my phone across the polished desk. I have a recording of the entire event. Ms. Albright raised an eyebrow as she listened through her earpiece. Her expression shifted from professional sympathy to focused interest. I watched her face tighten as she heard Serena's whispered comment at the end. She's too weak to fight back anyway. She looked up at me. That changes things. That demonstrates clear intent to cause emotional distress. There's more, I said. I pulled the folded printout from my purse and laid it on the desk. This is a partial transcript from their family group chat from a few weeks ago. They planned it. She read the words, her sharp eyes missing nothing. A slow, cold anger seemed to emanate from her. She leaned back, looking at me with a newfound respect. Ms. Hayes, she said, her voice now hard as steel. You are not weak. You are prepared. Forget mediation. We will draft a cease and desist letter that they will not soon forget. We will make it unequivocally clear that their coordinated campaign of harassment has now exposed them to significant legal jeopardy, including a formal complaint to Child Protective Services for the deliberate creation of a hostile and emotionally damaging environment for your son. For the first time in years, I felt the tight band of anxiety around my chest loosen. I wasn't just a grieving widow anymore. I was a client. I had an advocate. 2 days later, the letters were sent by courier, one addressed to each adult who had raised their hand. I spent the day in a state of suspended animation, a strange mix of terror and empowerment. I took Leo to the park after school, pushing him on the swings, my mind a million miles away. What if they retaliated? What if this made everything worse? I felt a moment of intense fear, the kind that makes you want to call it all off, to retreat back into the familiar misery of silence. But then I looked at Leo's smiling face, and the fear receded, replaced by the stable the silence from the It was a low and silence. At 3:15 p.m. My phone buzzed. It was a text from He was not very busy. I deleted it. 10 minutes later, Serena began her stuff. A lawyer. After everything we did for you, this is the last. You are trying to tear this family apart over one stupid dinner party misunderstanding. You are a vindictive, horrible person. Liam would be ashamed of you. I read the messages, and instead of pain, I felt a profound sense of validation. She wasn't sorry. She was just angry she'd been caught. I blocked her number. The next day, a card arrived in the mail. The handwriting was Catherine's. I opened it with a steady hand. It wasn't an apology. It was a masterpiece of self-pity and blame-shifting. I am sorry for the pain Sunday's events caused you. It began. We never intended to be cruel, only to find a way forward. Perhaps our methods were clumsy, but for you to respond with legal threats is a betrayal I cannot comprehend. You have chosen to make this a war. Ilara, I hope you can live with what you've done to Liam's family. I folded the card and placed it in a drawer. It was more evidence. That evening, Uncle Arthur called. Heard you sent the wolves a letter from a bigger wolf, he said, a low chuckle in his voice. Serena hasn't stopped crying and complaining about it for a day. Says you're trying to ruin her life. She tried to ruin mine first. I said quietly, that she did. He agreed. Well, for one, I am proud of you. It's about time someone stood up to her. His words meant more to me than he could ever know. That weekend, as I was making pancakes, Leo looked up at me from the kitchen table. Are we going back to Grandma Catherine's house again? He asked. His voice small. I knelt down in front of him, taking his hands in mine. No, sweetheart, I said gently. I don't think we will be for a long time. He considered this for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. Okay. Can we go to the beach instead? Just us? Yes, I said, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost hurt. The beach sounds perfect. It's been 6 months since the letters were delivered. The silence that followed hasn't broken. It has deepened, calcified into a permanent state of being. But it's a different kind of silence now. It's not the tense, waiting silence of a room where you're not wanted. It's the clean, quiet peace of a home where you are safe. For the first time since Liam died, I feel free. I don't rehearse conversations in my head. Inoffensive words that might come in from seeing it. I no longer have to say facts and more importantly, Leo's thriving. He stopped watching the mail for birthday parties and never went to love. He was handing the We have built new rituals, forged in the space their absence created. These traditions aren't based on obligation or the desperate preservation of a broken thing. They are based on joy. Every Sunday morning, we go to the beach. The one Liam used to take him to as a toddler. We buy hot chocolates, even in the summer, and walk along the shoreline, collecting sea glass. Leo brings his sketchbook. I bring a book. We sit on our blanket. And we don't have to pretend. We talk about everything, and nothing about the weird creatures at the bottom of the ocean. About the plot twists in his favorite cartoons. About what he thinks his dad would be doing if he were here. There is no tension. No subtext. Just the sound of the waves and the easy rhythm of our own small, complete family. I also started therapy. That was new. I'd always carried the quiet prejudice that therapy was for people who were falling apart. Now I know it's for people who are determined to hold themselves together, without bleeding out in silence. My therapist, a kind woman with gentle eyes, helped me put a name to what happened that night. And in the years leading up to it, it wasn't just a misunderstanding or family drama. It was emotional abuse. It was manipulation. It was the kind of sophisticated bullying that adults disguise with smiles and dinner invitations. She helped me see that the vote wasn't a sudden betrayal, but the logical, brutal climax of a long campaign of disrespect. That clarity was like setting a dislocated bone back into place. It hurt, and then it began to heal. And strangely, the anger is gone. I don't lie awake imagining Serena's face when she read that letter. I don't wish them ill. That's the part no one tells you about healing. It makes revenge seem so small, so irrelevant. I didn't send those letters to ruin their lives. I sent them to reclaim my own. I did it so my son could see what strength really looks like. Strength isn't screaming at a table full of people who have already judged you. It isn't pleading to be loved. Strength is knowing, with absolute certainty, that you can walk out of that room and still command respect long after the door has closed behind you. Some people might say I overreacted, that it was just a vote among family. But if you have ever had to sit silently in a room full of people who treat your presence as a burden, you know how deafening that silence can be. I didn't take love I did it to build boundaries so clear and so hard that cruelty could never reach it. The truth is, I gave them years of my grace, my patience, my understanding. I gave them every chance to treat me as a person. But the mother of the answer, I failed to respond to the love of the severity. They counted on my silence because they understood the weakness. I've learned that family isn't sacred just because it's family. Blood doesn't get any license to speak. DNA is not an excuse for me. And loyalty does not mean tolerating your own erasure. Real family is built. It is chosen. It is earned. Uncle Arthur still comes by every Saturday. He and Leo play terrible games of chess and eat the sugary cookies he brings from the corner bakery. He never mentions the others. And I never ask. Last week, as Leo was setting up the chessboard, he looked at me and asked, Do you think they miss us? I paused, considering my answer carefully. Maybe, I said, but missing someone doesn't mean you treated them right. He nodded, a flicker of profound understanding in his 10-year-old eyes, and went back to his game. He is growing up with a wisdom that was forged in pain, but a wisdom that will protect his kind heart for the rest of his life. I used to think my story was about being shut out. I see now that it isn't. It's about walking away and realizing I didn't lose a family. I escaped one. And in the space we cleared, we are building something quieter, safer, and entirely our own. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever been the one who had to be quiet to keep the peace, the one who was underestimated, I hope you find a piece of your own strength in it. Sometimes, walking away isn't a sign of weakness. It's the most powerful statement you can ever make. If you connected with this journey of finding a voice, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who might need to hear this message. And I'd love to read your own stories in the comments below. Have you ever had to walk away to protect your peace? For more true stories about resilience, healing, and the quiet power of starting over, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue to share stories that matter. Thank you for being here, for listening. Remember, you don't need a room full of people to belong. You just need one safe space where you are truly heard.